Call to order tonight's school board meeting for Hudson School District. Could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, we have citizens' right to speak, or request to speak time, and I believe we have no one here for that. Nothing. So we'll move on to reports, starting off with the school board election. Nick?
You bet. So what you have here is the final ballot draw document that our clerk has certified. Molly has signed it, and so the order of the ballot draw was this morning. Tim conducted the draw. We had multiple witnesses and even a candidate that showed up. So Megan Rosowski will appear first on the primary ballot, then Jeannie Castro, then John Dolan, then Maria Rudy, then Joe Rivera. So there is a primary. It will be on the 17th of February because there's more than 4 candidates running. You have to have a primary to get it down to no more than 2 per open elected position. So that primary, people will get to vote for 2, and the top 4 vote getters will then be able to move into the next round, which is in April. So, thanks.
Okay, moving on to Act 20 update with Tara.
Yep, this is me. Yeah. So we've got a few members from the teaching and learning team here. I'll let them introduce themselves and their position, and then they'll give us an update on Act 20.
All right, well, thank you for listening to our updates on Wisconsin's reading legislation known as Act 20. My name is Laura Monarchek. I'm the Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning. Here with me tonight is Jenna Weiland, our K through 5 literacy specialist, and Melissa Miller, our district's data and assessment coordinator. The work that this team has done to ensure that students, staff, and families are well supported while also ensuring that compliance with the law has been nothing short of extraordinary. And it's just so incredible to see the impact that it's having on students. There's often a lot of conversation about what we're doing because of the law surrounding Act 20. But what we've found is that it's very much aligned to the district's strategic plan, the vision, the mission, and the core values. And so we've really started to reframe how we talk about Act 20 when we talked about it with students, families, and teachers, that this is the work we do because it's best for students, not because we have to do it. So these are a few of the fundamental ways that it aligns with HSD's new strategic plan. As you can see, it is heavily aligned with Focus Area 1, academic achievement. We see alignment for students, staff, parents, and families, and so we know how important this work is. So we've really done a lot of work to make sure that the systems we put in place are manageable, sustainable, and truly beneficial for our students.
Okay, so I'm going to talk through what Act 20 exactly is. So this slide reviews Act 20, which is a state mandated process, and this is going to talk through how it applies to the different grade levels. So Act 20 is a process that applies 4K through grade 3s, and it starts with that step 1 with the curriculum and making sure that we are using a science of reading based curriculum, and then we're not teaching kids to guess or use that 3 cueing system. After that, all K through 3 students participate in a state-approved literacy screener that is the same one that everyone in the state of Wisconsin uses. It's Ames Web Plus. They do this 3 times a year to monitor progress and then inform our instruction. 4K students also do a screener, but they only do it twice a year. Students in K through 3 who score below the 25th percentile then are moved on to the next area, and they're determined that they are at risk for reading. These students go through diagnostic assessments to identify specific skills that they are struggling with. Then, based on that diagnostic data, we create what's called a personalized reading plan, or you might hear us refer to it as a PRP. This outlines goals for that student specifically, targets specific interventions for them, and is a way for us to communicate that intervention and the progress with families. These students on PRPs have ongoing progress monitoring, and because of that, we're able to see throughout the process of their plan if we need to change instruction or if we need to continue doing what we're doing if it is working. Now, some students also receive additional supports. We do have summer school options for all students, but we have a specific intensive one for those that are still on PRPs in 3rd grade. Now, starting next year in 3rd grade, Act 20 will include a Act 20 will include a promotion policy where we will need to look at kids that are on PRPs in 3rd grade. If they do not come off of that PRP, we need to look at what's next year and what's entailed for them for best options. Now, one thing, the state only has a mandate K through 3. We actually, as a district, really believe in what this does, so we've implemented it for grades 4 through 5. Those students also have similar screening processes and go through that same idea to ensure literacy support. So we do have PRPs, even though it's not required by the state, for grades 4 through 5 as well.
All right, and now we're going to dig in a little more into the steps that Jenna has mentioned. So like she said, we take the screener and then we have diagnostic assessments as well. And so that makes my data heart very happy because it gives us a lot of data to look at and make decisions off of. So what we do as a district, we do and participate in something we call data roll-throughs. So myself as the data assessment coordinator, Jenna is the literacy specialist, and then the building reading specialist, principal, and school psychologist all get together and we review the new student data, we review the progress that they're making, and we create that actionable personalized reading plan and what we want it to look like. So what I've included on the screen that you're seeing is actually a screenshot from our data system that is NextPath, and it's really great because what we see as teachers is all of the data laid out for that student and how they're performing in each of those literacy areas. It is a lot of information, but depending on a grade level, we're looking at 4 to 6 tests for the screener, and then another additional 3 to 5 tests for the diagnostics, and as well as the progress monitoring data that Jenna mentioned as well. And then based on that data and information, we're asking the question, is Tier 1 instruction right for the student? Is this student now dropping and needing a new PRP? Is this student able to continue the PRP as is because they're making great progress, they're just not there yet? Do we need to intensify their PRP or de-intensify it in any way? Or are they ready to exit their PRP? And so again, that conversation, we look at 3 main areas where we're really able to personalize that reading plan. And as Laura mentioned, that this is something that HSD lives and breathes even before the law of Act 20 came into place. So what I've put in the upper right-hand corner of this screen is our MTSS model, or our multi-tiered systems of support. So what we have here is what explains that students go from universal supports or light supports all the way to specialized supports. Just because you're in the specialized supports category doesn't mean that all those supports before it go away, which is why they're encompassed in each other. So when we're looking at a level of support, we have those different types of plans. We call them classroom plans or pull-out intervention plans. We have special education plans. It can look many different ways, but our goal is always to have the least restrictive environment, because we know that we want to be warm demanders and we want to create independent learners. We don't want to over support or scaffold a student and rob them of that opportunity for independence. And so then once we answer that question, what's the right fit for the student in this model? Where are they fitting best for their plan and where they're at currently? We then name a skill focus. We look at, do they need help with phonological awareness, decoding, comprehension, vocabulary? And then after that, we can then find our best fit instructional resource to help them close any gaps that are there. We have many different resources, and we just put a few up there for you to see. The first one actually is what we call our structured literacy plans, and that actually came out of our LETRS literacy training that we had. So all of our teachers have that background and that plan that follows the science of reading and best practices. Then we also have the resource of Benchmark Phonics and Sunday, which are more actual resource curriculum type, 6-minute fluency, and Haggerty, which hones in on phonological awareness.
So this slide is going to outline how these are executed. We know our days are full, so you're probably wondering, how do we fit this all in with everything we're doing? Teachers will often ask the same thing. Well, Every teacher has a 30-minute block we call their target time. It's their targeted intervention time. This is the time that PRPs are implemented, as well as all kids are really getting what targeted supports they need. So during this time, you'll see teachers meeting with small targeted groups in the classroom based on those needs. Some kids are also, like Melissa had mentioned, pulled out for a pull-out intervention or potentially a special ed intervention or even an EL intervention. This is also an opportunity for those kids that do not have PRPs to still do practice at specific skills they have. We want to make sure that we are targeting all students. Every kid has different needs. So when we go through that big data wall that Melissa shared, we do talk about those kids that are at risk, but then we also spend a good chunk of time talking about those kids that are in that 25th to 60th percentile. What do we do for them? And then what about those above the 60th percentile? Because we really want to make sure that all students are targeting their needs and the skill practice we have for them is purposeful. With this, it requires a lot of support from our reading teachers in our building. Each building has a reading teacher, and those are really our biggest assets for this becoming successful. So I'm going to go over what their role is specifically. So number one, they meet with students. Our highest need students, pull-out interventions go with our reading specialists. We know that they have the most training, therefore they get those kids that need the most specialized supports. They also support by overseeing and supporting their reading assistants that see intervention groups. One way to support them in their schedules is each of them have chunks in their day that are called Act 20 time. They have little half-hour chunks for each grade level, K through 3, where it aligns typically with those grade levels, specials, or their preps so that they can meet with teachers. And during that time, they're consulting with teachers. They're talking about student data. What are they seeing? What's working? What's not working? Do we need to make adjustments? They're also talking about best practices in literacy to make sure that we are really staying with the research and we're using evidence-based strategies. And then, like I said, they're supporting those students that are not on a PRP. Is there a kid who maybe didn't flag as high risk that they're worried about a classroom teacher? They'll consult about them. Or again, if it's the other end of the spectrum that we have a student who's doing really well, how can we continue to push them to show growth as well? So they have a really big role in this, and we really couldn't do this without them. Now, one of the things we talk about is exiting a PRP. Once you've shown enough progress, you can exit a PRP. The state has tasked districts to pick their own criteria for exiting students. You might hear about surrounding districts, they exit students as soon as they hit the 25th percentile. Now, when we looked at that, we thought about it, we thought, the hard part with that is, you know what's gonna happen. They're gonna be out, they're gonna go in, they're gonna go out, they're gonna go in. And we don't want that seesaw effect. We really wanna make sure we're building sustainable and transferable skills. So here in Hudson, we made sure that was our priority when we determined our exit criteria. Our exit criteria is the 40th percentile on that screener. So we really want to make sure that those kids have a solid set of skills because we believe once they hit the 40th percentile, students then have the necessary skills to access that tier 1 instruction and continue to grow. And again, just exiting a PRP doesn't mean the support stops. We want to go back to that MTSS model and really show that all students are constantly supported and monitored with that universal support and instruction.
There's so much research out there about the necessity to include families in their child's education, and specifically when kids are learning how to read. Family communication and partnerships are so important. So one of the things that we have done is send out a beginning of the year reading survey for all students in grades 5. Act 20 requires us to send this survey out to any student's family who qualified by scoring beneath the 25th percentile. But again, we looked at that survey and thought, all families should have an opportunity to fill this out so that teachers can get valuable information about kids as readers before they even walk into their door as students. And so those questions kind of talk about the child's interests as far as reading, what they like to read, what they struggle with, how they believe that their child could best be supported through reading instruction. And then it also asks about any family history with dyslexia or reading difficulties, writing difficulties, spelling difficulties. And we make sure that families know that the survey is, you don't have to fill out the questions if there's anything on there that makes you uncomfortable. So that's a really important part of our communication and partnership with families. Teachers have said that they find that information really valuable when they start their work with students at the beginning of the year. We also have consistent communication on progress, and Melissa showed you that NextPath screen with all that data on it. There's also a parent portal that we use to communicate screener results with students or with families. So anytime a child takes a screener, that populates into NextPath and parents get a notification and they're able to go into that and see how their child is performing. It talks about the different literacy measures that are being looked at, and it shows what percentile that child has performed in each of those measures. So that's a really important way to keep families involved. We also have our reading specialists. Again, Jenna mentioned how pivotal they are to the success of this program. They are constantly communicating with families, and so that's a really important cog in this wheel as well. And then obviously we have that parent-teacher conferences. Parents are, teachers talk with families at conferences about how their child is doing, if they're below, at, or above grade level, so we can kind of talk about progress for all students as well. We also have summer learning opportunities for all of our students. So this is something that is not new to Act 20. We've always offered Introduction to Kindergarten and then that Reading Jump Starts for grades 1 through 5. And this is really just an opportunity to get students kind of familiarized with how we go about reading instruction in our district. Jenna and I are actually working on making some revisions to those programs because right now they reflect what we used to do, but we want to update that to be more aligned with CKLA. So that's what we're working on right now. You also heard Jenna talk about the third grade summer reading intensification. And so this program is for third graders who have not yet exited their PRP. And this one is by invite only because it targets those specific skills aligned to the science of reading. So that oral language and vocabulary, phonics and decoding, fluency and comprehension. If we let that be open to everybody, it would be really difficult for the teachers to target that instruction on the kids who need it the most, because if you have an above level learner, it just doesn't mix well when you're trying to focus on targeted skills. So that one is by invitation only. And the great part about it is it's offered in the afternoons and the other ones are offered in the morning. So students can come to both sessions and kind of get ready to jump into CKLA and also get that targeted support.
So overall, using this process, what does our data show? That how are we doing as a district? What does it look like? So for Act 20, we are required to report the amount of PRPs we have per grade level to the state. So I keep track of all that data, and what I like to show you guys today, which I thought was a great snapshot, is we just finished our winter PRP window. So we just went through all of our data roll-throughs, we just redid all the PRPs, kids are out there, we're learning, and so I like to compare last winter, which was our first time ever giving the state mandated screener and writing PRPs, to this winter, now that we're seasoned veterans. So you can see, just for example, for kindergarten, last winter we had 69 PRPs, and this winter we have 41. So we're down 28 PRPs. First grade, we're down 47 PRPs. Second grade, we're down 15 PRPs. And third grade, we're down 30. So what is contributing to having less PRPs? Why do we think we're seeing this happen? First and foremost, what it's telling us is that our Tier 1 mainstream instruction is working. And so that evidence-based resource of CKLA that's aligned to the science of reading, as well as knowledge learning, is really helping and supporting our students at all levels. And then the science of reading training that we had for our K-5 teachers. That letters training is crucial, that teachers have that toolbox of skills and strategies in their back pocket at all times. And they're able then to implement those strategies at any given moment. And then additionally, we also really looked at our small group instruction. As Jenna said, that intervention block that we have during the day, like, how do we make this the most purposeful possible? So we wanted to make sure that those small groups were focused on those science of reading strategies and using those tools with things like structured literacy plans, as I mentioned earlier. And finally, there is one other component that's kind of outside of our district, but AimsWeb Plus re-normed their screener for the first time in 7 years. So I just think that is an important thing to make sure everybody's aware of, that because of COVID, they delayed their normal norming process. So what this means is this winter's numbers are actually closer and more accurate in comparing our students to their peers across the state in the year of 2026.
Megan?
This is fantastic. I just want to thank you so much for all the work you're doing. There's so much here, and I see the difference it's making. I have a kindergartner who's doing CKLA right now, and the patience she has to sit there and sound out words it's unbelievable. Just the way it's being taught. I loved seeing the curriculum with my older child too, but like, and then this layering of everything, I'm just so excited about how this is going and so thankful for all your work and the work of all of our teachers who have learned new curriculum and trained. And I'm so excited to see how this is going to keep improving. So big kudos to you all.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about, needing to establish that strong base, strong enough so they can stay in the program and not seesaw. Having a child that struggled with reading throughout his educational career, to see that when it clicks and then all of a sudden it can lose it just as fast. So, appreciate that. Molly?
I just want to echo what Megan was saying, that this was a huge lift, I know, for many years for you people, educators and professionals. And it's so great to see the results. I'm sure you're all so happy. I can see your smiling faces, and it's so great. And I noticed, like, what I really appreciated too is it seems really geared towards the individual child, not for the group as a whole. And you're really digging down into what is it with this person, and also the communication with parents so that they are fully aware of what's going on and they can reinforce and kind of have that conversation that's super important between families and educators. So you guys are awesome, and just convey that to all the teachers that this is amazing. I'm so excited. I wish I was in kindergarten again. It's just so much fun to be little, and I can see you guys are just amazing educators too. So thank you.
Real quick, echo everything they said. Thank you for all that you do. I have a couple of data questions. So I'm curious, and I just want to make sure that so that I'm understanding correctly. As you're looking at I'm going to go back to it. So you guys talk about the 25th percentile, identify at-risk students, score below 25th percentile. And then you talk about the exit strategy is at 40. And I love that, like saying, nope, we want them performing really well and setting them up for success. So my question becomes for what happens with those kiddos, you know where I'm going, who are at 25 or above and kind of in that category? What are we doing for them? Because I have to believe there's something there. So I want to just give you the space to talk a little bit about those kiddos too.
Yeah, so and I'll start and then you guys can chime in as necessary. But I think what's really important is when we talked about that roll through process, we do talk about every kid on that list. And so we address first those students that flag and make that PRP plan. And then our next step is looking at those students that are between the 25th and 60th percentile and saying, and what's our plan for them? We notify the teacher that that's the band they're in. We make a plan of attack is what we call it, to say, okay, now during that small group time, what are they getting specifically? What skills are lagging that put them still in that bubble area, not yet fully proficient? And we let the teachers then use different strategies and those literacy plans also on those students. So just because a teacher might be meeting with a PRP group, they can also pull these other students in to work on those specific skills when they need it.
Yeah, like she said, they pull them in as guests. Also, PRPs, typically, if they are not pull-out interventions, the pull-outs usually are 5 days a week. When they're not pull-out, we usually do them 3 days a week because we also want that child to be working in the other type of things through the core. So that allows the teacher 2 extra days. So there are times where teachers will pull a group and maybe 2 days a week, or even some of our de-intensify groups will be 3 days, move down to 2 days. And then like Melissa said, they might pull these other, if that kid is at the 30th percentile, they're not quite exiting yet, they still have a PRP. Well, I have these other 3 kids that are in that same one that don't qualify for the official plan. We still execute all of those things and talk through them. So the reading specialist, that's part of their job as well, is they give, here's your list of your PRP kiddos, what they're focusing on. Here are your next group of kids, though. We also want to make sure that you are intensifying instruction for them as well, because yes, we don't want to forget about them either.
Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you for presenting. Great report. Yeah. Yep.
Perfect.
It's worth clapping for. I'm a clapper.
Okay, next on the agenda is the superintendent federal update with Nick.
Yes, thank you. So had the opportunity last week, as I sit on the AASA's executive board, we were out in Washington, D.C. last week for a couple days meeting with the Department of Education, specifically the Assistant Secretary for Elementary and Secondary Education, the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights and Compliance, and then also the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Department of Ed. And so really they wanted some feedback, as there are major changes happening in the Department of Education right now, as I think everybody's aware. Both to give us kind of a heads up as to what they see coming down the pipe, but also getting some feedback from us, responding to it. And just a couple things I kind of wanted to highlight, and things to, you know, kind of keep on our radar as it relates to things. You know, first of all, you know, want to kind of talk about what's changing, what isn't changing, and what we should be kind of watching together, you know, as school community folks. You know, the clear message from them was not disruption for disruption's sake. I mean, they don't want to dismantle just to dismantle, but a strong push towards state level control. You know, they want to have fewer federal burdens, more flexibility, and they paired that with the recognition that, you know, districts need predictability. That's one of the things that we talked about over and over again. We had some situations that happened this last spring this last summer, where all of a sudden districts were counting on funding. It had been allocated by the legislature, the federal legislature, and then all of a sudden it was being withheld, and it really created some real challenges. You know, a couple things to kind of start with what's not changing. You know, formula funding streams are still going to exist in Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, IDEA. All those different pieces are still going to be in place. They're not looking at changing the funding streams or the formulas related to that. The district allocations are not being redistributed. You know, they're not looking at all of a sudden just basically throwing everything out and starting over. One of the things they highlighted is that although a lot of the people that were working at the Department of Ed are not any longer, I think they reduced almost 2/3 of the staff, or 70% of the staff. A lot of those folks that were our main contacts in the Department of Ed are actually now working for like the Department of Labor, the Department of the Interior, you know, different departments, and working on the same topics that they were working on in the Department of Ed. So there could be things related to CTE contacts and things like that, so our career and technical education, that typically we'd be calling the Department of Ed about, talking to certain people. Now that's being moved to the Department of Labor. And lo and behold, some of the same people, not all of the same people, because there has been a reduction, but some of the same people are still there. And there's no real changes as of right now when it comes to like the funding pieces that happen. However, the Department of Ed and the way they distribute funds is different than all the other federal, I'd say bureaucracies, but I guess departments would be a better, more fair term. And so it's only a matter of time before some of those things start changing, because once the Department of Ed, if they have fewer and fewer programs that are overseeing certain funds and certain areas, then it's going to be more than likely it's going to move to how does the Department of Labor distribute funds? How's the Department of the Interior distribute funds? You know, all these different folks. The Department of State may start overseeing all international students and what that looks like. And so it's not going to be a sudden elimination or anything like that, or a shift away from districts' dollars. However, we do need to stay definitely on top of those dollars, because there have been several budget proposals that have been made by both the administration and legislative proposals that do show reductions to allocations for education. So not necessarily as it relates to cutting the Department of Ed, but just wanting to cut programming in general or cut allocations. And so I think that's important for us to keep in mind. The big thing and what is changing, why it matters, the big push is increased state flexibility through waivers. They issued their very first waiver actually the day before we went out there. Iowa received the first waiver, allowing them to consolidate state activity and set aside funds across multiple ESSA programs, so that's Elementary and Secondary Schools Act. And so what's going to happen is it's almost like putting the entire state as a charter, essentially waiving a lot of the federal regulation. However, there's the waiver process you have to go through, you have to prove it and things like that. I think they said something like 13 other states are now applying for these waivers. I'm not sure where Wisconsin is on that process. That's coming up. I have a meeting coming up on Wednesday with the Department of Public Instruction. They're going to be giving us an update on that. Again, although they claim increased flexibility, which in theory sounds good, a lot of this stuff is not finalized. And so, one of the things I'll be telling my colleagues on the statewide call is I give them feedback from last week is our influence now matters more than anything. For the longest time, lobbying at the federal level, with education was not a big thing. It was kind of a federal education policy really didn't change much. It was kind of a slow moving animal kind of thing, but now it is moving very quickly. It is changing, drastically at different times. And so, it created a kind of a new lobbying front for us that typically has not been on the huge radar for, regular districts. The big urbans have always had a pretty heavy federal lobbying presence just because of the way the formulas are set up and stuff like that. But it is going to impact all of us moving forward. Their goal is with these EdFlex waivers that they hand out to the state is that it's supposed to be, providing, some level of relief to districts. We brought up things as simple as the CDRC, which is a data collection process that we have to do. I don't know if it's annually, Tara. I mean, it is hours. When I say hours, I mean, it's like 40 to 60 hours of time at the district level to input this stuff. And you start to look at some of this and we never quite get the outputs. We put a lot of stuff in and never get anything from it. And so they're looking at some, that's just one example of, okay, are there things that we could do a little bit different? There's also, some potential language changes and things along the lines with IDEA and how that is administered and the amount of bureaucracy or red tape associated with that. Because, part of why we have as many positions as we have sometimes is to do the level of paperwork that's required by some of these federal programs. And we are a highly regulated entity. The other piece, I think that we wanted to make sure that we stressed and that we kept getting the point across is, when you're thinking about the grant programs, whether it be before and after school grant programs, or we have, some of them happen to be with like alcohol and drug grant programs, things along those lines. When we don't know if those funds are going to be there, it's hard for us to then employ staff. And we're in the budget setting process and we're in the hiring process in the spring. And if all of a sudden, yep, we think we're going to get this money, and then all of a sudden June rolls around and they say, nope, you're not getting this money, that creates some real challenges for us. Not as big of a challenge for Hudson as it is for a lot of other districts in the state, just because of the way the dollars are allocated, and it tends to be based on levels of poverty. There are some districts that have anywhere from 15 to 20% of their district budget is coming from federal dollars. Ours is more like 1%. 1.5%. So we're not quite as susceptible to some of these federal swings, but that doesn't mean that, having those dollars leave doesn't impact our kids or doesn't impact what we're trying to do. I talked a little bit about the data collection pieces. We just continue to hit them on the amount of data and the amount of things that they require from districts to upload and then we don't ever quite see the outputs. Like, it'd be one thing if all of a sudden we're going to put up this data and then we're going to get usable information with it. It's kind of like NAEP data. We have to sit for the NAEP exams and things like that, but then we never find out exactly how our kids do. We just find out as a whole, and which makes it a little bit challenging. They did acknowledge, that there's some tension right now between some of the civil rights compliance and classroom safety pieces and things along those lines, especially as it relates to IDEA, because that has been some of the feedback in how we are working with students and how we're keeping our staff safe and keeping other students safe and what does that look like, those pieces. One area I thought was kind of interesting is, as much as they're wanting to push things back to the state, they are starting up a kind of a federal task force related to AI. And so, like, they're wanting to clarify a narrative on AI, and we currently have some really competing points of view right now. So right now in the you know, the blogosphere or whatever you want to call it, the narrative is less screen time for kids. Less, you know, get them off the devices, less screen time, all this stuff. And then at the same time, make sure you're teaching them how to use AI and make sure you're getting them, you know, to utilize technology to make their lives better and their jobs easier and that they can do these things. Really hard to teach AI if you don't have kids on devices to do those things. And so it's trying to find that balance of, you know, where does it, so it's not standalone, because everything that we're researching and seeing about artificial intelligence and how to use it, you want to incorporate it into what you're doing, not to have it be a standalone separate item. And so those are kind of, you know, some competing things that are going on right now as we look forward. And, you know, they even claim that, you know, with AI, they still want to remain, you know, maintain local control. They keep pushing this local control mindset, but I'll be interested to see where that goes. And at the end of the day, the big picture, the long term, we asked, what's your long-term vision? Smaller Department of Public Instruction, you know, Department of Education. They don't have the authority to completely unwind or wind it completely down. It takes an act of Congress to do that. But essentially, you know, as you go to that building last Thursday, like I said, 2/3 to 70% of the staff is no longer there. You know, as you walk around that building, 3/4 of the spaces are empty. And so it is a totally different feel as you go through it. I just, you know, I think the biggest thing that we want to see is, do the dollars actually flow through to the districts? Do the dollars flow through to the state through block grants, and do we actually get those dollars? That's the biggest concern. You know, the original thing was, well, we're going to streamline the Department of Ed, we're going to cut all these things, so then that savings will get passed on to the districts. But at least the first set of budget proposals that came out from the current administration and the current Congress, it was the exact opposite. They were cutting the Department of Ed, and they weren't funding the programs at the levels that they currently were. So that is kind of a real challenge for us. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, we're kind of in uncharted waters, because the level or the speed at which things are changing is unprecedented at the federal level. This is just, it's never been like this. This is unbelievably fast, even at the state level. And so it's something we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on. I'm sure down at convention next week, there will be some conversations. There's some breakout sessions related to federal stuff that's going to be coming down the pipe. But it was quite interesting. It was nice to have a seat at the table, that they wanted superintendents at the table saying, this is what we're thinking, give us some feedback on these things. They genuinely seemed to be taking some feedback. They asked very good questions as we went through it. Spent quite a bit of time. So the proof will kind of be in the pudding as you move forward. So what questions do you have?
Mr. President? So I just want to, working in higher ed, which is a little bit different than what's been going on in K-12, but I think just a good point just to keep watching very carefully, because there's been unbelievable increase in unfunded mandate for more data that I don't know if we'll ever see from colleges. It's a different environment, but it's the same department. So I just think I'm glad to hear that they're saying they're not going to go that way, and I hope they stick with that. 2 questions for you, Nick. Could you say the full name of the organization you were out there with? You used the acronym.
Yep. So the American Association of School Administrators, and so that is the national organization for school superintendents.
Okay.
So I was out there with about 20 folks, sit on this board, and superintendents from all over the country. So it is a unique experience. You can hear what's going on in other parts of the country, some of their challenges, both from the federal level and the state level, and what's going on.
And then when you talked about that waiver that Iowa got, does this mean like all their title money's coming through a block grant now?
Yes.
Like sort of like when Medicaid went
Yeah.
to
So
block
what's going to
grants?
end up happening is, instead of having the strings attached related to the federal level, now there'll be strings attached related to the state level. We'll see if one's better than the other, to be quite honest with you. I mean, it's there's been a lot of things, at least been in my experience, that even at the state level isn't overly easy to deal with. So, but yeah, they're going to come through that way. So basically what happens to this waiver process is, you know, a lot of the programs that always continually need federal approval and you have to run all the way up through, the state will now be able to handle those at the state level, and it'll stop with them. So then, the state will also then be able to issue district-wide waivers, but not until the state has a waiver related to certain things, that districts could actually then apply for waivers as well, waiving some of these different requirements. Now, I'll be interested what those requirements exactly are that are gonna be waived, and what that looks like.
Nick, you keep saying waivers of different things. Could you just expand on what some of those waivers are?
Yep, let me just pull up here. So what ends up happening is anytime that we have federal monies, usually what happens is the Department of Ed at the federal level says, okay, how did you spend it? What were your outcomes? Did you hit these targets? Did you do all these different things? And so these waivers, essentially what will happen is when the state got granted that waiver, or Iowa got granted the waiver, they get to set their own outcomes. They get to turn around and say, if we do this, that meets the expectation for the law for the money that's been allocated. And then they get to turn around, and it's, similar for like if you get waivers down to the district level, we would create what we think are reasonable outcomes for us, and as long as they say okay, then we would meet our outcomes and things along those lines.
I guess I was going for a more specific example of what the waiver actually is for.
Well, and to be quite honest with you, I don't have 100% understanding of it because it just happened last Tuesday. And they are supposedly in the next week or two are going to be releasing the actual Iowa waiver that came out with all the documentation associated with it. So really, like I said, really what happens, the way waivers have worked in the past is we get money from the federal government, they put stipulations on it, you gotta meet those stipulations. The waivers basically say you don't have to meet the federal government stipulations, however, the state has to have stipulations, and they're gonna set their own stipulations. Regardless of what program it is, it could be grant programs, so it could be related to money that goes, related to mental health stuff. It could be stuff that could be related to title reading. There's also, we have a bucket of money that comes for professional development. I believe it's Title II, Title IV monies that come through. So all of those different things, basically, usually the thought process is, congratulations, you got money from the federal government. Condolences, you got money from the federal government. Because there are so many usually strings attached. How you can spend it, when it has to be spent, how you have to track the spending of it. And then, Carl Perkins, for example, being a former tech ed teacher, they'll say, yes, you can buy all this equipment, but here are all the parameters in which you could spend it on. And by the way, make sure you inventory and track that piece of equipment into eternity. Like, so that you always know. And then if you ever want to get rid of it, here's the big, long process of how you'll dispose of the federally subsidized equipment. I mean, it's just, anytime usually they get involved, it creates a lot of headaches for us.
I have another follow-up question
Yep.
here. When you were talking about all this AI stuff, I get a little, like most people hear AI and they start kind of freaking out because, we're down to like 7 seconds of a span of attention now, which is actually, we have entered less than a goldfish, which is a little scary from a marketing standpoint, seriously. So what were they talking about? Like, where were they proposing we add more AI? Or what was are they looking at like learning? Are they looking at replacing staff with it? That kind of is a scary thing, like teachers, like at what point administration, like where does this AI tool, are they focusing it on just learning with the students? Like how to just use ChatGPT, for example, and not abuse it?
Well, it was interesting because we asked that question and there wasn't a whole lot of detail or depth to the answers. And
You
so,
didn't get a robotic answer back?
yeah, I mean, it was,
Come on.
they started talking about how they're going to start using AI to deal with grant applications and things along those lines, scoring those things and stuff along those lines. However, is the notes I had down here is they're not going to have technically an official stance on classroom saturation of AI. They're not going to say, well, you have to use it or you don't have to use it. They just think it's really good. It's like, okay, That's an interesting take on it. And then they're like, you should be using it, but then they, countered that conversation with, but we really have a strong concern about screen time and, student mental health. And so it's like, okay, and worrying about, obviously, some of the chat bots and things like that and those pieces. So, it was very incoherent as far as the AI conversation. It's kind of like they feel like they should be talking about it, but they don't really have what they want to be talking about. And the thing is the AI conversation has been happening in most districts. I mean, we've been talking about it this year with our leadership team, talking about taking it from how do we utilize it as employees, then to all of a sudden, okay, how do we have kids utilize it in what they're doing? And so that's been our focus of all of our kind of leadership PD over the course of this year, and we'll continue to roll out going into next year.
Yeah, something popped up on my work laptop, and I'm like, asked a coworker, what's that? Well, that's your AI, assistant, right? And so I started playing around with it. I'm like, I wonder when we'll be loading these on our student Chromebooks, right?
So we,
You're scared.
No, I'm just saying, that's a frightening.
well,
yeah,
and- and we do have it. We do have Gemini. It's actually been loaded onto staff devices because it's part of our Google platform. So they do have access. Staff has access. We haven't unlocked it for students yet. But we have the paid version related to AI because we have to pay for student accounts anyway, so it comes with it. Part of the reason why we would prefer the paid version of AI software is because there's more controls in it as it relates to what information will be used for learning and teaching these language models and things like that. So our staff, as of right now, we're laying out parameters, not putting student data into AI or any identifiable student data, things along those lines, but also using the paid version of Gemini versus the free version of Gemini, because that means the stuff that we're putting in is not being added to the overall general learning model that can be accessed as we work through it. I imagine a lot of you at work have probably started getting Microsoft Copilot. That's the big one. I know my wife's work has now added that. And so we're going to continue to, play around with it. And I think with AI, for us, at least administratively, it's just, you just got to play with it. I mean, you got to use it. It can't just be, I'm going to do a standalone 15 minutes and then I'll come back to it next week. It's how can we start utilizing this within our daily workflow? So it's been interesting.
Mr. President?
Yep.
I know this is not fully our topic of conversation right now, but I feel like, first of all, I've seen Terminator 2 a lot of times, and I'm very afraid of AI, Skynet, that's the era I grew up in. I feel like it's fine to watch and see how it plays out, and as you read about leaders in Silicon Valley, their kids aren't using AI. So it's not our topic of conversation. Totally get folks using it to help them at work, grown-ups. I don't use it because I'm afraid of it. But, I hope as more discussions come with that, where it relates to curriculum, that we would have robust discussions here about it, because I'm
Yep, absolutely.
scared cat about
And
it.
I think the thing is everything's kind of changing, it's evolving, right? I mean, so, prior to the internet coming out, schools were the gatekeeper of all information. You had to go to schools in order to get information on anything. And so, it was definitely a game changer. So then all of a sudden, schools had to start to figure out, okay, since we're not the gatekeepers of information anymore, now what is our role? And it was more about being able, how do you utilize that information and how do you do these things? And, now it's going to change again with AI. And it's because not only is it that the information's out there on the internet, now you can put prompts into the things and have it do things for you. And, and I think that's the piece that, it's not about finding information now, it's actually completing tasks. And so that's going to change. It's got to change the way we do things. It's got to change the way we teach. Or there are assignments that we've been given maybe for the last 20 years that kids wouldn't even have to do. I think about it, my son at his first year of college, they either take paper pencil tests or they have to go to a testing center to take their test. They sign up for a test. So it's like a giant Sylvan. It's a giant building on campus. They all go there. They have to check all of their devices in a locker, and then they sit down at the computer, they log in, and there's their econ test, so that they can't, utilize AI to answer the questions and do those things. So, I mean, there's gonna be some of that conversation we're gonna have to have. Otherwise, kids will find ways around it.
Oh, yeah.
That's what they do.
Mr. President?
Maria,
I
or
just-
Molly, sorry.
I just wanted to, I had a couple questions. Thank you for going and advocating for districts. And the AI thing, I mean, I do think we need to have a discussion about
Yep.
that. Because I envision a kid that does a paper on using AI, and then the teacher uses AI to check it, and it's like, nobody's doing any work here. I think that's my feeling. And we have to be cognizant of our footprint for junk, water usage, and what it actually does. So I am completely like, I would rather have none. None. I'd rather have paper books and pencils. Go back to that, because we're gonna end up with people who can enter something on the computer, but they don't know jack. They don't know how to do anything. So, that's just my feeling, very strongly. The other question I had was, when you're talking with, this revamped Department of Education, what is the plan for if they're parceling out all these different parts that used to become, used to be in this, department as a whole? How are they, letting districts know this is where you now need to go for CTE? You go to the Department of Labor, or for the State Department for international students. How are we gonna know that?
So those, I mean, the one thing we don't have a shortage of is emails from the federal government, from the people that are responsible for these programs, and they push that stuff through and they let us know, this is now your new contact for X, Y, or Z. The other thing is, a lot of that is handled at the state level. So they're having the conversations with the state departments of education, not the State Department, but the state's departments of education. And then they're disseminating that information. You got to remember, the vast majority of our contact related to, even at the federal level, is through the state. There's not a whole lot of times that we're directly interacting with the federal Department of Education. Some of the big urbans have, some things that they do with it. But I would say for the vast majority of our interaction, even on federal programs, there's a local state contact related to it. So the bigger change is going to be probably for the 50 different state contacts that are around the country, that now we're gonna have a different federal contact when they're working through some of those programs.
Thank you.
Mr. President. So on that issue, Nick, when you're talking about waivers, my experience with waivers tends to be more on the Medicaid side, which is, it takes an act of the state legislature to change a program, then the administration applies to the feds say do this, the legislature goes back and changes it to do this. Is that what education waivers are going to look like? And what I'm getting at is, do we need to depend on the Wisconsin legislature and governor making changes, and in which case it's going to take a long time for us? And we're not Iowa.
Yeah, no, I know. And I think that the biggest concern I have is, whether it be at the federal level or the state level, is anytime, I'm a big proponent of divided government, because I think things tend to move a little bit slower. And I think part of the reason why Iowa went as fast as they had, they didn't have divided government, so they were able to kind of push through. It does take the state requesting the waiver, and that's DPI. So it's not even the governor's office, it's the state Department of Education that has to request the waiver. And so depending on what, if you have a Department of Education that doesn't want a waiver, there's nothing we can do at a local level. We'll still be under the same things that we've always been. And then the concern is also, it used to be, because even when administrations flipped at the federal level, things changed, but not really all that much. I mean, like I said, it was a big kind of slow animal. But now all of a sudden, if you start having big political shifts at the local or at the state level, you could have us going back and forth between the types of waivers that we have and what does this look like, and now all of a sudden we're changing things. So, yeah, it's I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, and it'll also be interesting to see, things can change every 2 years at the federal level, right? With midterm elections, and all of a sudden, Congress can bring things to a halt, depending on how things work. So, right now, state legislatures don't apply for those waivers. It's the State's Departments of Education. So, a little different than Medicaid, but they did such a wonderful job rolling out that block program that you don't have a huge level of confidence that it's gonna go overly well, with that, so.
Mr. President, I guess two quick things to echo. I agree with Molly. I think we need to have a conversation about AI sooner rather than later and think about not just like district level policy, but also hear from our teachers about how they're using it, what the challenges are to kind of inform that. I know as a parent, it is challenging to think about what the guardrails are and help kids use it. They're curious, they want to, and ChatGPT, Gronk, whatever you want to use, it does not always get it right, and you have to be able to verify that. So, and that's a skill set, and there's a basic skill set of being curious and knowing how to verify your information is going to be critical. And then just the other observation is, I think our biggest risk is right now the speed at which things are changing. It is in public health. Similar to you, it's hard. It's hard to manage the change from day to day of what's happening. So you being able to be in that conversation, I think, gives us a critical window and is helpful for us to start thinking long term. What might we need to be ready to pivot to do? So thank you for going. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, no other questions? Thanks again for your effort, Nick, on that. Moving on to reports. Oh, excuse me, topics for discussion and possible action. Looking for consent items.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I move approval of the consent items and that the Chief Financial and Operations Officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $1,065,126.74.
Do I have a second?
Mr. President. Oh,
Second for Megan.
The tie.
She's closer. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Consent items pass.
Mr.
Andrea.
President. Okay, so as you know, our deadline for retirements is December 15th. And given the timing of the board meeting, we have several new retirements that we want to be recognizing tonight. So first up is Tracy Havashaleen, Assistant Director of Community Relations, District Office, 18 years of service to the Hudson School District in her current role, as well as 2 years as a board member. So that's Tracy. And then we have Elsa Bredingen. She's a kindergarten teacher at Hudson Prairie, 28 years of service to the district. Linda Darley, a science teacher at the middle school, 5 years of service in the district. Jason Lund, art teacher at the high school, 25 years of service to the Hudson School District. Lisa Hayes, a media specialist at the high school, 20 years of service. And then another one in the room, Tim Miner, the superintendent's executive assistant, and he has 18 years of service to the district. So I'm sure the district will be celebrating them come the recognition banquet.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity because normally we don't have people here when these things are announced. First, I would say with Jason Lund, I remember when he was hired. I remember when he was a new teacher. And yeah, wow. Right? I mean, new impressionable, yep, and I was also younger. So, but I would, obviously we're all very familiar with Tim Miner, with Tracy, and with Andrea, and 18 years each. And Tim, how many for you? I forget. 18 as well? No, that's okay. How much for you, Andrea?
This is my 13th year.
13th year. So, a lot of history, a lot of great effort. I just personally would like to thank, and on behalf of the board, and for all those years, I mean, known many of you, some of you for 30 years, in our community, as parents, as employees at different schools, Tim, as a school board member with Tracy years ago, and as well as a district employee, and Andrea as well, great service. So I'd just like to stand. And we welcome any comments from anybody else that would like to speak as well. Maria?
Yeah, I just want to echo a couple, since Tracy, Andrea, and Tim are here in the room. Tracy, I have always appreciated your willingness to have a conversation and listen. You enter into every conversation just so thoughtfully, and your presence will be deeply missed. But I'm very excited for what's next for you. So thank you. Andrea, we've known each other as moms with kiddos in sports, and I appreciate your enthusiasm you always bring into everything. You are a glasses half full kind of person, and that is such an asset. And so you will be deeply missed, but hopefully not too far away. So congratulations. And Tim, I have learned a lot from you. You have been just a wonderful resource, both as a parent in the district, but also as I have onboarded to this board. Just always accessible and just enter everything with just such space and grace and kindness always. So thank you, and hopefully I'll see you on the cross-country trails over at Willow.
Mr. President?
Molly?
I adore all three of you, and I kind of feel like, how are we gonna go on? Like, I'm gonna just have a temper tantrum and you can't leave. I have known Tim since he was the administrative assistant person at North Hudson, so he's seen my kids from day one and all the terrible things that they used to do and being brought into the principal and all those things. And you're just a gem of a person. You really are. Tracy, I don't think people realize all the skills you have beyond this and all the things you do in our community, and that you are a fashionista. And I always think you are so cool, and someday I want to be as cool as you. And I agree completely that Andrea is a glass half full person. She's just a joy spreader. She just spreads joy wherever she goes, and we will miss you, all of you, very much. Thank you.
Okay. All right, very good. Moving on, we gotta have we already voted, so we'll move on to the WASB Delegate Assembly resolutions. Nick?
Yes, so you can click on that document. These are the delegate resolution, or delegate assembly resolutions. So as we continue, what we try to do is we put a district's administration, so Brian's the one, I believe, that's going on your behalf. He gets to have all the fun. And so what these are new resolutions. There's actually probably 100+ resolutions in the WASB resolution. Yet these would just be new resolutions or modifications to existing resolutions. And that will be voted on. There may be other items that get voted on as we work through it. I think there's a district that I forwarded you the information that's trying to kind of circumvent the resolution process. I don't know how that'll go. That'll be interesting for Brian to fill us in and let us know how that goes. But first resolution opposing the removal of caps from the Wisconsin Parental Choice Program. We were supportive, at least the administration's recommendation is to be supportive. The biggest question is, any additional money being spent on voucher programs will, in essence, cost taxpayers in our district more money because it'll be a reduction in state aid. Money's finite. There's only so much of it. If they're going to fund more money towards private programs, it's got to come from somewhere, and it has come from our district in the past and other districts, and so that's why we said we'd be, administration would be supportive of that resolution. And you can see there's more dialogue there. Revisions to the school district and school report card process, supportive. The current process does disproportionately impact Hudson, and the other problem with the school report card process is it changes every single year. And, what we're being held accountable for based on what matters more, growth or achievement and things like that, really creates some challenges for us. And because we are a high-performing district, but because we're a high-performing district that happens to have lower numbers of kids that have low SES, we get penalized for that. And so I understand they're trying to even out the playing field and things along those lines. However, we could end up scoring below. We could have more of our kids proficient, more of our kids doing what they need to do, moving our kids along as they should be moving along, and score below a district or below a school that doesn't, simply because of the makeup of our students. And so it would just be nice if they would just get to a metric and leave it alone, because they have changed it, at least I think in the 11 years I've been here, I think they've changed it almost every year as we work through it. The amendment to resolution.
Ask a question.
Yeah,
So with this revision to the report card, you know, I can see how you'd want to compare how free and reduced price lunch students are doing compared to other free and reduced price lunch, right? You know, like you want to take that into account to an extent. So this wouldn't be stripping out necessarily the data on your share of free and reduced price lunch students. It would just be that the underscoring weighting would, and just not change it so we can compare to year.
yeah, so we would still.
It'd be nice to have a decade to compare some data
Yes.
that's the same.
So you'd still be getting data based on those different
Okay.
subgroups. However, you know, like I said, what tends to happen is based on your free reduced lunch levels, all of a sudden achievement can mean less, growth can mean more, or all these different components. And, you know, it is a little bit challenging, and sometimes it feels like it's in an effort to protect big urbans because they aren't hitting the levels they need to hit. And so, you know, I was talking with the superintendent from another district who said, I don't even understand what's going on. The previous year, they had an elementary school identified as a blue ribbon school of academic excellence, and the next year, they were just meeting standards. They weren't even exceeding standards or significantly exceeding standards. They were like on the third tier low, and it's like, and their scores were the same level. It's not like all of a sudden they had to drop in scores, but it was because they were changing the way that they were weighting the different parts, and it created some real challenges. And so it is, I understand that, you know, there are definitely some different indicators and stuff, but it has created some challenges for districts. The amendment to resolution for funds distribution, it was kind of neutral. I mean, it was just some language pieces in there. You know, it's just the distribution of funds intended for educational programs for youth in elementary and high school age. And, you know, again, the other piece is if we move to block grants, more block grant oriented, have DPI oversee that so we don't end up in a system like what Brian was talking about where it takes huge acts of the legislature in order to sometimes even get our money. And then it sits in frozen land.
I have another question,
yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. So they're changing it here from public schools to any school system receiving public
Yep.
funds. So
Yep.
this would create, in theory, more oversight for
Oversight of vouchers.
private
Yep.
and voucher?
Yep.
Because that, to me, I feel more supportive than neutral on that. I don't know if people want to have a discussion, but I feel like if taxpayer money is being spent, shouldn't there be supervision of those outcomes? Don't we want those measures? The accountability, the difference in accountability to me is very problematic, that it's just money, public money can go to private schools and there is not accountability, whereas we're held to accountability. Seems problematic.
Is that the goal of this resolution?
Well,
Do you know if that's the intent of this resolution? To make all schools accountable to, they receive public funds, they must be accountable for what they use it for.
I mean, I didn't quite read it that, you know, the same way, but I thought it was more about flow through and making sure the money came through, but. I
It
could be
is.
wrong.
Then I'll be, okay, so.
Oh, you
I was
were
g-
there.
I was gonna wait till the end, but I serve on the Policy and Resolutions Committee, and we meet 3 times, you know, and this will, before, at the.
Which
Tuesday-
committee is
at
that
the
again,
Tu-
Bob?
Policy and Resolutions Committee. Oh, yeah, I was talked into it, by Alan Totenhagen, so I won't return his calls anymore, no. No, but it's been very, no, it's been, very interesting, and it gave us an opportunity to talk to state legislators, which was awesome. But in this case, this was one that was debated back and forth about what is the true intent. And it is about the flow through, like Nick mentioned. It's not necessarily to, you know, because when you read it, you're like, hey, yeah, exactly, you know. It's interesting because you'll have a resolution, separate resolutions. When you read them, they look like one wants to go this way, one wants to go the other way, but then when you dig into them, the intent is actually they're very similar. So we've had a bunch of those where we had to strip off and go with one and, you know, reword it. And there's another one down the list farther. When we get there, I'll talk about that. But, you know, I'm fine with the neutral on this
Okay.
one because there's not like a underlying current or agenda that I see that would damage districts like ours.
Thanks for clarifying.
The next one is related to authority to schedule referendums. And I think the big piece is we're supportive of, you know, it's hard for, in one breath, legislatures, whether it be the federal or state, to say they support local control, and then they say, but yet we want to limit your ability to exercise local control. And so, you know, restricting referendums flies in the face of local control. We talked about that. We support having the decision at the local level. If the local taxpayers are willing to support something, then that's what they're willing to do. So I believe they added the word frequency in there as they look at that. So we were supportive of that.
So as you can imagine, this was one that was talked about quite a bit. And when we had Representative Kitchens and Senator, what's that? Yeah, Molly's favorite, yeah. That came up. It came up in dialogue during our meetings. It came up in dialogue after the speeches they gave. Again, it's like you're setting us up. You're setting districts up to fail. And so at least be accountable for that. And so that was the reasoning behind this. And, you know, sometimes it's like everybody in the room sees something and they see what it is and they see the irony or the hypocrisy or what have you. And that's kind of the way it is. But this was a big one. And so absolutely.
Okay, the next one, you say, why would you be neutral on a substance abuse disorder and treatment aid? Well, it's could be supportive. It could be very positive, but with the strings attached, you never quite know. Again, it's that congratulations, you got the money, condolences, you got the money type of piece. But then also, you know, and I've talked to you about this before. I think that, and we've talked about this, you know, with our legislators, and I know I have, is very supportive of more support for mental health, for substance abuse, things along those lines. However, would it be better situated at the county level versus the school level? Not that, I mean, we'd absolutely, you know, allow folks to come in. We currently have co-located mental health services and things like that. But you have to remember, kids aren't only in crisis between, you know, 8 and 3:30. And so we're set up primarily for a during the day situation, whereas counties are set up for, you know, 24/7 response. And so, and for us, I mean, because we're able to provide, you know, find providers and things like that with some of these grants, but I know with some of the districts, you know, more rural districts, even with mental health money, it's hard to find providers. And so they get the grant money and then they can't spend it. And then the other piece is this is more related to substance abuse and treatment and things like that. So I think definitely a, you know, positive thing. It's just, you know, anytime you start adding categorical aids to certain things, you start to tie strings to it, and then the money's got to come from somewhere. So it's instead of general spendable aid, it's going to have very specific things you can spend it on.
Mr. President?
Yes, Megan.
And kind of, this is sort of lumping 6 and 8 together, but I understand the neutral on the substance abuse disorder and the universal state covered meals. The issue for me is like when you're talking about these categorical aids, our per pupil funding is not where it needs to be. So now we're creating these different pockets of money that take more time for people to fill out paperwork. Whereas if we were just funded at a way that it kept up with inflation, schools could decide how they needed to spend this for their students, instead of how many fund codes does Bonnie have to track, where the money, you know, it just gets so complicated instead of just funding the schools, instead of making up all these new categories is my problem with it.
Absolutely. The next one is vocation transition for students with disabilities. You know, we've had children that are part of our transition program have been in to talk with the board and talk about some of the wonderful things that we have going on. Supportive, we'd appreciate more support for our kids in our transition programs and making sure that, you know, as they transition to the next phase in their lives, that they have those opportunities. And so I think it would be supportive, but it's more about being collaborative with the Department of Voc Rehab, you know, as you kind of work through it. Number 8, going back to what Megan said, you know, state legislation to establish a fund for a universal school meal program to cover the cost of all student meals not covered by federal programs. And so, I mean, I could be neutral to negative on it because you ask Brian, how's that going in Minnesota? And it's,
You know, it's stabilized, Nick.
stabilized at what they thought it was going to be, or slightly higher?
No, slightly higher, Nick.
Slightly.
Roughly double.
Double.
Yeah.
It cost double what they thought it would cost. And part of that is because it's not just looking at, okay, how many more kids or how many more meals. You have kids that typically wouldn't eat. This happened during COVID, that might bring their meals from home, but then they're like, well, if I'm getting it for free, I might as well, especially high school kids, I'll eat a school lunch and I'll eat the lunch my parents, made for me at home. And so all of a sudden the numbers start going through the roof. The reason why neutral to potentially not supportive is money's finite. We're already not funding, as Megan said, adequately for just general state aid for school districts. And so, if we don't have enough money to deal with class sizes and reading programs and things like that, yet there's already a federal program that has been established for folks that meet the requirements, that can't afford food. It's kind of like, let's get all of our other kind of ducks in a row first, and if there's still money and things left over, then I think we can start doing some of that. But I had this conversation 2 years ago when I was on the WASDA board with the state superintendent. I said, I'm just a little concerned. In your state budget proposal, you have 5 times as much money you want allocated for a school lunch program than you do for reading initiatives. And yet we already have a school lunch program through the federal government. That's a little alarming. So that wasn't met with a real positive response. But I think there's no doubt about it. I think what people have to understand is 41% of our kids in the state of Wisconsin qualify for free or reduced lunch under the federal program. That's, what we consider the poverty level. Hudson, we're in a little different boat. We're right around, between 9 and 11%. And so we are considered a very affluent district as it goes through that. And I think the biggest challenge is, I know there's a stigma associated with, sometimes people think there's a stigma associated with applying for this aid or things like that. And the thought is, well, if everybody just gets it free, then it eliminates that stigma, which it does and it doesn't. And the other question is, at what cost? And what else are we giving up in an effort to do that? And so kind of
I think we should.
Neutral.
I would go negative on this personally. First of all, when lunches were free, I had my kid get a free lunch every day because it's like, why am I going to make a sandwich when it's free? I don't need free lunch for my kids. So to me, it's just like there are too many other issues. There are too many things that need funding. If there was a world with infinite money, sure, but we know that's not the situation. I think second, right now with this current Department of Ed, they are talking about moving away, maybe going to these block grants. But when you don't have students filling out their free and reduced price lunch applications, then you don't know how many students qualify, and then those schools can actually suffer in the amount of Title I funds that they get. So you have these unintended consequences that can impact funding for the schools that need that federal funding that I think maybe people don't think all the way through. Because it sounds good. It sounds good. Feed kids, right? Like, yes. But I don't need taxpayer dollars to cover my kids' food. I'd rather have a higher per pupil revenue cap for schools so that teachers can be paid well, we can have smaller class sizes, whatever, et cetera. So in this environment, to me, this is not a priority by any means.
Mr. President?
Aaron?
I agree with Megan I think we should be opposing that, or at least not supportive of it. Mainly, you know, for various reasons, not all parents want their kids to have school lunch, whether it's free or not. They've got dietary restrictions, they've got, health concerns, and truth be told, most kids, they pick what they want on their plate, what's in front of them, that's all they're gonna eat, and the rest of it goes in the trash. So I agree, we would be throwing money away, and I think we do have good programs in place, for kids that, to ensure that they are getting meals, and I don't wanna see those programs go away because we don't want any kid being hungry, at school. That's not a great way to learn, and be focused. So I wanna continue to be able to help those kids, but I mean, everybody doesn't need a free lunch. I don't mean to say it in a negative way, I just don't believe that everybody needs that. And most families in this district, I think, would support not having to have a free lunch for their kids.
Anybody else?
All right. The Public Education Endowment.
Oh,
go ahead.
So are
I
we,
was just gonna say I agree with opposing this one.
so are we changing that then to
Yep,
opposing?
changed
So
already.
I changed it
Wonderful,
to not
thank you.
supported. The Public Education Endowment Fund, I don't know, Bonnie, maybe you know more about how this would work, but to me, it just seems like it would complicate the funding. It's already unbelievably complicated because, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what.
I have no comment on this one, because no, I mean, this was, this was a head scratcher. I don't have anything to add as far as, that's why, you know, talking is neutral, because I don't see how pros or cons on this one.
Mr. President.
Right.
I was just gonna say, we can be neutral on it, but we've got one of these in Minnesota. It's got about $1.5 billion in assets in the fund. But we can only distribute the earnings of the fund every year. So we've got $1 billion sitting in a trust fund, and we distribute about $30 million per year to all the school districts across the state of Minnesota. So, you know, if Hudson were in Minnesota, we'd be getting $2,000 a year or something like that out of the fund, and it's useless. I'd much rather they raise revenue and add it to general ed formula.
So is that something we want to change as well? Then?
I'm down with that.
Okay.
Okay. Amendment to Resolution Early Childhood Education Funding Public-Private Partnerships. Again, supportive. And really what it is, you know, if you're gonna, it goes back to what Megan was asking about earlier. All publicly funded 3K and 4K schools, including schools receiving voucher funding or funding through public agencies other than DPI, must have the same level of accountability, reporting, and transparency standards and requirements. You know, it's kind of said, you know, if people can do it better privately than we can do it publicly, playing by the exact same rules, then, you know, more power to them. But it's not fair if they don't have to play by the same rules. And so, you know, however, we would like to, you know, limit resources being funded away from public schools. And this goes back to is it Get Kids Ahead grant? Get Kids Ready grant. And the big concern is, you know, that's part of where the governor made the deal with the legislature, and that eliminated some of our special education reimbursement funding to shift it towards reimbursements for 4K programs for private providers. Originally, it was supposed to be to help offset childcare cost for people, because it sounds really, you know, noble to do that. However, that's not what it's turning out to be. It's showing a potential reimbursement at a much higher rate than what we could reimburse at for 4K, and almost to a level higher than what we generate with 4K. And so, you know, supportive of holding people accountable and keeping public-private partnerships, because I think we've had a very successful one. over the last 8 years, 9 years as we've had that. But there's a little bit of a caution, like to limit the resources being funneled away from the district.
Mr. President,
Yes, Megan, or Aaron, sorry.
that's okay.
To the left.
I'm not super supportive of this for a couple of reasons. I just want to dissect it just a little bit and start with recognizing that I support holding all public-funded 3K, 4K programs, public, private, voucher, all that to the same level. I have no issues with that, and that's why I like taking more of a neutral approach to this. Acknowledging that competition and choice can be healthy for families and communities, and Wisconsin has a long history of mixed delivery 4K models. We have strong private and community-based providers right here in Hudson, and many of which end up at kindergarten here in our public schools. So I don't really believe that it's our role to imply that they shouldn't have access to funding simply because they are not operated by the district. I think that actually harms us if we're looking at keeping partnerships strong, maintaining them, maintaining multiple pre-K delivery options also gives the district some breathing room, especially with spacing right now and staffing, potential consolidation pressures, and pulling all 4K under one single public model isn't really necessary to serve students that well, and in fact doing so could really limit our flexibility at a time where we really need more flexibility, not less. So there's that factor. And then lastly, I kind of have an issue with the wording, and I get we didn't put this wording in there, I just want to make that clear. But while DPI certified teachers are one pathway to quality instruction, many early childhood educators are highly capable without that certification. We've become increasingly flexible with expectations for academic proficiency for students, but yet this rationale would, this resolution actually would remove flexibility in who can teach 4-year-olds, potentially eliminating the labor pool and increasing costs unnecessarily at that pre-K level. So I don't fully support the resolution as written, but I recognize its intent for sure, and I would be more supportive of a neutral stance.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I didn't read it that way. So, right now, with our community partners for 4K, the money comes through our district and goes to them, right?
Yeah,
That's currently what happens, but with this Get Ready Kids, it can be completely disconnected.
Correct.
Right? So I think it's not trying to take away from like the ability of our school district to work with St. Pat's and Trinity, for example. It's just saying there should be those partnerships, because that's how it has been traditionally. It's confusing.
I'm not reading it the same way, but that's,
Okay.
I mean, that, says all 4K programs should be funded through school districts with local flexibility and contract with private childcare providers to provide 4K instruction as determined by the school board.
Yeah, so that's the model we currently have right now, is it goes through the school district and then we pay the private providers with our model. But it wouldn't mean that all 4K are in-house 4K programs or anything like that, because it just means everything kind of flow through the school district. And each school district works and sets contracts with different providers for how much the reimbursement is. And we're expected then to oversee that and provide oversight to make sure that it is a certified teacher in there and that it is, they are meeting all of those expectations. Right now, our community-based 4K programs have certified teachers in them, all of them. And that hasn't been an issue or a roadblock to having the programs. Because I think parents have kind of grown accustomed to that expectation.
In the district here, because this actually kind of tags with something else that's in the agenda, and it's just an observation that I noticed when I was reading through this. There's a job posting later on for teachers that says DPI certified, and I can completely understand why that would be important for kindergarten through 12 to have that. My question is if our goal is that we would use 4K teachers and be able to pull them up into into, you know, other roles versus, I mean, why do we really, is it that big? It's not that big of a deal that they have that certification is kind of my point. Like,
I mean, we
like
would.
the language in here
yeah.
just says that children deserve having that. And that's kind of like my big issue. It's like, what do you mean they deserve having that? It just downgrades teachers, I think, in general, because there's a lot of great teachers. There's a lot of people that are excellent. They don't necessarily have that one, you know, this one special certification over here, which is very important. I understand that, but it doesn't mean that other teachers are not equally as good or don't have that experience.
Well, I
Does that
mean,
make sense?
yeah, I mean, I guess I would look at it, it's basically that certificate, it's a license to teach, right? And so, you know, I kind of would equate it to, you know, are there certain medical areas that you don't think should have license versus others? You know, if somebody says, well, you know, maybe it's not as important for this area to have as much certification. I think it's set up because we would expect that the level of training it takes to get the licensure at DPI for 4K, it is a 4-year college degree. They have been trained to work with kids at that age level, so it's age appropriate. You know, one could argue, we do have alternate pathways to certifications, even in other grades. There's not an alternate pathway to certifications in the elementaries, but we do have some in career and technical education and some of the high school stuff. But, you know, the expectation is we would think that the instruction at 4K is just as important as the instruction at kindergarten, and to ensure that the level of instruction is going on is just as good is what we would provide. That's the rationale. That's the rationale behind it. Not that somebody that doesn't have a teaching degree can't do a good job, but you know, it's kind of like a medical degree. If you don't have the degree, you can't practice medicine. Even if you could know everything about it, but if you don't have the degree, you can't do it. So this is just basically saying you gotta have a license to be a state-run 4K provider.
And I think that's, to me, I totally get what you're saying with the deserve. It rubs the wrong way. But with this new Get Kids Ready, you're going to have private healthcare, now that you brought up doctors, private daycares, which are great. I sent my kids have gone to private daycares. They had fantastic teachers, right? Like, and you know, like my kids went to kindergarten here. It was awesome. People, you go to 4K kindergarten there. This wouldn't change their ability to have 4K, but if they're getting public funds, again, it's this, and they're even getting more public dollars than we are for 4K. To me, it's not fair to give taxpayer money to private for-profit, which isn't necessarily bad, but a private for-profit business that does not have to meet the same standards we do. That to me it's not a fair thing, right? Like, it just isn't fair. You go give more money to a different organization that doesn't need to meet the same standards than if our kids go to school at our school.
And I think that, you
But
know,
I'm looking at this, that these are 4-year-olds, not 11th graders. You know, I mean, they're 4-year-olds. I don't know how else to say that.
yeah, I agree with Megan on the you know, private or you know, public money going to private. And again, I try and be very understanding of the relationships we have. It's the model we have had. We were late to the game on 4K, however many years ago it was. And, you know, this community made this decision. This is what they would like us to do, and we have been doing it. And, so, and then there are people in our community that now are saying, why don't we gobble it all up and just take it back? So there's that. And I don't want to put, you know, community providers that have been doing a great job over the years in jeopardy for that, and take business away. I think, you know, I'm fine with it the way it is, but I do believe the expectation of our parents is that 4K is no different than kindergarten, or, you know, that they want quality, and there are minimum standards to that, and that's what I feel with Marie.
So I hadn't looked the standards up, and there's a website and a document with core competencies for 4K teachers, and there's 12 areas. It'll be an interesting document to read. I think in hearing the conversation, I am supportive of the resolution, but I would actually be open to, I do think the word deserving feels condescending and unnecessary in this statement, so would fully support taking it out. But I do believe if you're gonna get public dollars, there are standards that are set. We have standards set for the public dollars we receive, and that's true for any organization, not just education. You can take any entity that receives them. There are standards and requirements they have to follow, not just for reporting, but for being able to receive the funds and all sorts of things. So I think that feels fair and fine to me, but, yeah, we could make it less condescending, would be nice.
Well, that's the resolution as it's written.
It
so
is,
we can't change a word, so.
I mean, that's.
But
kind of
Brian
what
could make an amendment.
Brian could make a friendly amendment.
He could make a friendly
You
amendment.
stole my thunder.
Oh, sorry. I did it the past couple years, so.
I believe just taking a neutral stance on it would allow for that conversation to even happen.
Would you, actually, the way that conversation would happen would be if somebody made an amendment request, and then that would go through that whole process. They would vote on that because that would actually get it talking instead. A neutral just makes we're neutral. It doesn't, it kind of is like punt, right? So, but if you really want to address that word, that's the guy that can, after the legislative session, he'll tell you.
Brian.
And so just make sure it's a friendly amendment. And I mean, seriously though, that is the way to actually try and make a change.
Right.
Our neutral vote just kicks us off the field, basically.
Okay.
I feel like those last two sentences could be deleting. The lower the requirements in childcare centers, deserve fully DPI certified teachers. Daycare providers have a hard enough time, yeah.
Yeah, I think we have 4K teachers in our district, and I think what they do is very important. I think it does matter that they're certified.
Well, that's why I was asking the question, if that's like the goal for our district, that we would use those 4K teachers and have them, because like I had mentioned, that job posting says DPI certified, and that's our rationale for having that in there.
I'll throw this to
Does that
the
make sense?
admin team. Anybody have any opinions they'd like to add on this that we're missing, or? You can say it,
Well,
You guys are blowing it. I mean,
We do, like Nick just said, I mean, we do, our 4K teachers are our licensed teachers, often with multiple licensures and DPI. Sometimes we have kindergarten teachers that then go into the 4K role. And I think it's been fantastic to have that level of expertise in those positions. And I think you're seeing successes in the program.
I would say that as a kindergarten teacher, once the 4K program started up, we saw a big difference in kids coming in. And our teachers for 4K, they are trained in letters too, so they go through all the same training as the rest of our teachers.
I was just going to quickly say too, it's not necessarily a standalone license. Our 4K teachers are licensed up to 3rd grade. So we do have a lot of teachers that switch back and forth. We're thinking of our special ed teachers. Sometimes they service our 3-year-olds, our 4K kids, and then they'll service some 2nd and 3rd graders because that's their license. It's nice to have them, that whole scope of the developmental process for the kiddo that we're working with, so.
And I can appreciate the flexibility there that it gives the district to do that. So that's why I mentioned it the way that I did.
okay, Megan?
I don't know. Do you just change the last sentence? Like the amendment is for publicly funded 4K students? Or you just strike the last sentence? Because is the rationale even in what goes to legislators then? It's just in our book? How does that look, Bob?
Yeah, it does go to legislators.
Okay.
It absolutely does.
So then I think, if that word deserve is hitting Aaron like that, it's gonna hit other people that way, so I think that's a good thing to note.
And again, so this is not a one-time thing where they're gonna vote on it and then they're gonna give it to the legislature and
Yes.
they're gonna vote immediately on yea or
No.
nay. They, like Nick said, how many resolutions are sitting out there in a bucket?
Hundreds.
Yeah, hundreds. So this resolution could come back. It could, I mean, there's a half-cent sales tax or whatever is one sitting in a bucket out there that we would like them to work on, that they keep talking about. Should we bring it back? Well, they just brought it back for, I think, for the second time a year ago. So they said, no, let's not push this. Let's try something else and give it a break and come back to it. So
Maybe just striking it to say something like 4K students deserve teachers to meet their educational needs and leave it at that, or just striking that line totally. That would,
okay, Brian, can you note that?
Yeah, I can note that. However, I'm not sure I completely agree. No, but I agree, as written, there's kind of I don't know, a value statement there that I don't think it needs. I think the language could be more neutral. However, in my opinion, I think if it's a publicly funded 4K program, I think we should at those centers have the same standard, which is a certified teacher. So I think that that's an important piece to the rationale here, is saying that at these programs, we want them to have level funding with the funding the school district is seeing, and then that the quality of programming is at the same standard.
Yeah, publicly funded 4K programs should all meet the same standards or
Yeah.
something. It takes the judgment out of it.
Right.
I like that value statement. Yeah.
Okay. And then stay with supportive. Are we in agreement on that? And here's the thing, is the more districts that come back with a supportive, the bulk of that, the understanding of that, the funding is supported. So, okay. All right, geez, I thought 11 was gonna be the long discussion.
I got stuff on these too.
So, so kind of neutral on the decoupling of public and private school funding, and the reason we say neutral on this, and Bonnie could probably speak to it better than I can, but essentially, decoupling means instead of it coming out of the appropriations related to K-12, it has its own standalone appropriation within the budget process, which some people say, well, that'd be great because it won't be taken away from K-12 anymore, but you gotta remember, everything that's a standalone thing in the appropriation process, they're all in competition for one another, right? I mean, there's only so many dollars. And at least the way it's set up right now is, so when let's say they take $100 million off to do, or $200 million off to do vouchers, they literally take that right from money that was supposed to go to K-12, and then they allow districts to turn around and they have districts go ahead and levy for it. So basically, it just passes it straight on to property taxpayers. And it used to be, we used to be able to show how much that was, and then they kind of pulled that out and won't let us do that anymore. So if you pull it out as its own standalone appropriation, then you're not having that backfill piece, right? So you're not putting money on property taxpayers to backfill it. However, the downside of that is now you have another thing that's getting funded within the state budget that's in competition with public K-12. There are definitely pros and cons to both sides. I don't know, Bonnie, if you have thoughts on it.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is if you're a district that is losing money, we do not, but it's very transparent. And right now it's not. So people don't know that money is going to private schools. I think there has been a big education push in the last month to get that out there. But it's that transparency. But I agree with Nick, is like having another entity that you're competing with isn't in our best interest. I mean, we compete with everybody already, so.
I have a question. So let's say it's decoupled, and then there's not enough money to fund at the per pupil revenue level. There's less money that's going to the districts, not districts like ours where we don't have students using vouchers, but it was taken off the top. Then is our per pupil revenue just gonna be less because we can't?
Right, I mean, currently, like Nick had said, just if you do have this going, you have the ability to pass that on to your taxpayers. But our district that does not have that situation, we have less state aid coming into our district. So that pot has gotten smaller district-wide or statewide.
Okay,
So there's two ways you get hit
Okay.
by it. So the one way is Bonnie was talking about, if you have vouchers within your district, they take that money from you, and then they say to you, go ahead and put it on your property taxpayers to recover that money, so you get it that way. But if you don't have kids in your district that are on vouchers, like Hudson doesn't have kids in the district on vouchers, you say, well, look, it's not impacting Hudson at all because that number is zero. Well, it is, because the overall choice programs are already collectively taking state aid and reducing the amount of money that's in the pot. So when we talk about, the revenue formula and everything else, and how much state aid do we get, general state aid and stuff like that, they've already taken that out of that pot. So that means we're getting less that way also. So the districts that have a lot of vouchers within their districts, they get hit twice. We're only kind of getting hit once. It's,
And I think it's the value of the legislation. Like, do they value K-12 education? If they do, this would be great because then we'd get more money. But right now, they're funding the vouchers more than they're funding us. So does that push more money into that? That's why we said the
that's
pros and
what I'm
cons.
really worried about. And then if the income caps come off, then we could start having more vouchers, in theory.
Well,
District-wide.
I know Nick wanted to throw, or enjoyed throwing, Brian under the bus with Minnesota, and I was gonna throw Nick under the bus with Iowa. Look what's happening. How's that going down there, Nick?
yeah, it's turned into a really tough situation for them down there because they don't have income restrictions down there. And, they had a little bit of an ease in, but then well, as soon as they pulled any restrictions off, all of a sudden, it goes back to the whole food service program. If you can afford to pay for your kids' food, why do you need the state government to step in? If you can afford to pay for your, private education on top of what's offered, why do you need the state to step in? And so, it's interesting because you have two different sides on the voucher system model and the statewide food model. And both sides take opposite views, even though they're basically almost the same thing. You're paying for services that people can already afford to pay for on their behalf. And in an environment where resources are finite, and it's not as though we're all swimming in dollars, where it's like, okay, we have so much money, we don't know what to do with it. Now let's see if we can throw some over here and throw some over there. So the reason it's neutral is it really comes to how do you track it? And
So, yeah, this was supposed to be kind of the first meeting we had in Resolutions Committee meeting was, this looked like a no-brainer, right? But then you get into the language of it, and then it come back for your second meeting, and then people brought up different questions about what are the long-term ramifications of this, and I think we've just gone over some of the same things that it was fun to see you guys come up with the same things that were brought up at the second meeting. So, and again, that's why, something like this is gonna be, tossed around and looked at a lot. Whether they vote to put it again to the legislature as something to support or not, I don't know. I mean, me knowing that, and again, the municipalities are the ones that are doing the pushing now to get it on the tax bills to show what's going for vouchers. So that's not something, hopefully, that more municipalities are doing that. Green Bay, I mentioned, did it successfully, and that's will drive, I think, more awareness of that. I mean, we can talk about it every year. It doesn't seem to, matter down in Madison, but.
I think to be consistent in my thinking, as Nick noticed, sometimes people, you're not using the same logic. I am opposed to the decoupling. So I would say not supportive of 11 and supportive of 12. Because I think what I would really like is for there to be some resolution that says the state has to tell you how much money your district is losing to the statewide voucher program, right? Like, that's what I would like to see, that there has to be a report like that. This decoupling, the more things that are in competition with each other, like you said, Nick, I think it is going to hurt public schools. And as the data nerd, yeah, it'd be a great data point to have, but the risk, I think, of decoupling it is very high. And then you go back and forth between administrations, right? Maybe someone funds more and makes me nervous.
And this was those opposing viewpoints that I mentioned earlier. That's what this is. So, I mean, the easy button is neutral, right, on both, but you're saying not support 11 and support 12?
Yeah.
Anybody else have input on that?
So thinking about your comment earlier about what neutral means on this, there could be a strategy saying remain neutral to just kind of let this fizzle out and not actually move it forward for in discussion, so that there can be more kind of noodling at a lower level to kind of figure this out and have conversations. But if the strategy is to say we really want to force a conversation, then I think, yeah, I would lean towards supporting the conversation from a point of opposing the decoupling and keeping them linked for now. But no matter how you dice it, this is going to be the thing that we're going to continue to wrestle with, whether it's decoupled or not, and the impacts that are felt. I mean, we are losing money because we don't qualify for enough state aid. We did get dinged in that way for our public schools. I can go either way. I can see the strategy to say, just let this kind of fizzle and have more conversation over time at a lower level rather than pushing the conversation, and I could get behind it. So sorry to be wishy-washy in my thinking.
No, that's okay. And I think if it's neutral, you're just not voting for it, right? So it might just fizzle out anyway.
Okay.
And really, Megan, I'm sorry, now because the logic is very hard to hold on to. You're advocating to support 12 or oppose 11?
Both, or at least oppose 11. I mean,
Well, what I'm
which
getting
we-
to is
yeah.
is in reading the bylaws that were sent to me about the amendment process, we'll consider 11 first. If 11 fails, or really 11's the
risk.
where everything is, right? So if we're going to do it, I think we would want to oppose 11, and thus support 12, which I've been sitting over here waffling, but as I think about it more, I think I agree with you, and it to me it gets to that last sentence of the rationale of 12 about eroding transparency with a fully separate funding stream going to really non-public entities. It kind of goes back to the 4K discussion we just had, that public dollars is tax dollars, no transparency, no standards. Those schools should exist, they can exist, but they should be private, they should be privately funded, not with our tax dollars.
Are we good with that?
Yep.
Opposing 11?
Opposing 11
11.
and supporting 12.
I like Bonnie and I Switzerland approach, but whatever. I'm just kidding. And as you discuss these things, as you can see, it's not an overly easy, just like, hey, just go through this real quick and give us your take on it, because you're trying to navigate the landmines that can be. The last one, encouraging schools to participate in WIA policymaking, neutral. Here's the thing. I'm not a huge fan of the WIA. I don't make that. I don't think anybody who knows me knows that's not a real out there opinion. The reason why I worry about the WIA is it does have little oversight, even though they say they're ruled by their membership, right? The problem is if you ever step outside the guidelines, they just basically excommunicate you, and so it's a challenge. And the WIA is different than WASB or WASDA or WASBO or any of these other ones, because all the other organizations in the state have no oversight of our kids. They don't apply rule, they don't put rules, they don't do any of this stuff. But the WIA does, it has complete oversight of our kids, and they're gonna say, well, it's not mandated that you're part of it, however, what they do is they say to all their other organizations, you can't participate with any school that doesn't do it, so therefore, you don't have any ability to do anything other than be a part of it, and then if you're a part of it, you have no ability to do anything other than follow their rules, and there's not the same level of oversight that we have. And so, as you read through this, I don't know. I mean, they're going to be, WASB encourages its member schools to participate and engage in WIAA policy process when necessary and appropriate. It's kind of like, I don't even know how it made it through here. Maybe Bob has an idea, but I mean, it's like a feel-good sentence. I don't know. I mean,
I was gonna say, why is this even something on the table? I mean, the first rationale statement is WASB has a practice of avoiding adopting resolutions in an attempt to dictate WIAA policy. So why are we even having this as a potential resolution?
It was late.
Sure,
No,
got it.
No, I mean, again, like Nick's not the only one
Yeah.
that has, with WIA. So, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a struggle there going on for, control and relevance. Ugh. I honestly didn't see either way, I mean, so I honestly, I'm fine with neutral. I don't know, I don't see really reason to oppose it, but I don't see any gain from it either, so, but that's just, again, and once, I don't, I'm not part of a team that writes the resolutions down at these meetings. We get them brought to us and we determine which ones are worthy of moving forward. So, oh yeah, so,
I'll call him.
so,
Is that a spelling error in the last
Yeah,
line?
it should say WSB instead of WASP.
WASPS? Okay, just checking.
I think this is a really strange resolution because they don't seem to go together. The repealing of 3.96 and then the weird encouragement. But they seem like odd bedfellows.
What they're basically trying to say is, instead of having a specific resolution related to performance-enhancing drugs and training methods, just eliminate that specific resolution that's been around since 2019 or whatever it is, and just have it say, encourage member schools to just participate in the rulemaking process. So, I don't know I don't know what district came up with this resolution or what the impetus behind it was. The reason I put neutral on it is for the same reason Bob
I
said.
think we should be a thumbs down because it's so poorly written. And what is it gonna do?
yeah, spelling
It
errors.
was AI.
It was AI. Probably, I still think it's goofy.
I think I'd prefer, I guess, neutral, just so, and probably not supportive, but the existing one is kind of ridiculous. That's the only policy.
We're going from ridiculous to ridiculous, so it
Well-
really doesn't matter.
Well, Brian, after the 4-hour legislative session you're going to sit in with 100 people, I'd like you to really hone in on this one, what the discussion
You're
is,
gonna wanna
and
run.
You're gonna bring that back to us.
Flavor of it.
So I'd advocate neutral on this one.
Yeah. You'll be done by this point.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And just note that they'll tell you not to bring up like grammatical, like I think you're missing a comma after this word, but people are gonna do it.
So I'm ready to call the question on this one. Are we all in agreement? We're done on that? Please, thank you. That was fun.
That was
yes.
the longest we've ever taken to go over WASB policy resolutions in the 11
Hey,
years.
you know what? Some new board members, right? So-
By 30 times longer.
Aren't you glad we care,
Why are the
Nick?
new board members being thrown under the bus?
Yeah, Bob's throwing you under the bus.
No, I was throwing Iowa under the bus. Iowa sucks. But anyway,
I
all
think
right,
it's
moving.
because the stuff coming out of the policy committee was so poorly
That's right.
written.
Okay.
That's exactly.
Moving on to long-term debt, which is very exciting. Bonnie, let's talk.
Sure, so we have some good news to report. We did go out on January 7th and we did refinance our long-term debt. That we had estimated the savings to be about 2.6 million when Brian Brewer was here, and it actually came in at over $3 million. So that was good news. We locked in, so our rates went from 4% down to 2.81%. So.
And Bonnie, just a reminder, that's savings. It's not an actual reduction that happens right now, but it just means money that we will not be asking the taxpayers for
Correct.
in the future.
Correct.
Here.
Long-term savings of our debt payments. Yep.
Savings. Thank you.
Okay, good news. And then open enrollment space determination.
Yes, so this is the presentation or the memo that we had during the work session. No modifications to the recommendation with respect to the basic open enrollment and recommendation is that that all of that there's unlimited space available, with the caveat that then there's a special education determination.
And you're seeing the same thing that you saw at the work session. In the world of special education, there'd be 0 spaces for open enrollment.
Mr. President,
Yes, Megan.
I make a motion to approve the 2026-27 open enrollment recommendation.
Second.
Second from Brian. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, passes. Moving on to first reading of 200 series, oh wait. Oh, yep. 200 series and teacher job descriptions with Andrea.
Yes, so this again, we have talked about this a couple different work sessions about the 200 series. Very few modifications, but they are reflected in this document. And so our recommendation is to proceed with the first reading of the 200 series, and then also the teacher job description, which is just primarily being updated pursuant to policy to reflect a more modern approach to the teacher job description than what we have currently.
Okay. Nothing necessary at this time, and we'll hear about that again at,
We'll need a motion to do that first reading.
First
Yep.
reading.
okay, motion to approve first reading.
Mr. President,
Yes, Molly.
I move that we approve the first reading of the 200 series and the teacher job description as presented.
I second.
Second from Maria. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. And motion passes. Yes, Megan. Or Aaron.
So on page 8, it talks about the annual performance evaluation for the superintendent, and that it should occur prior to newly elected board members taking oath of office in April. So my question is, when are we scheduling to do that? Like, I mean, is there a certain month that we can schedule to do that? And then I'm asking that because the last time we did that was after the election. So I wanted, do we need to schedule that before this April election is my question. And we also discussed potential, rediscussing contract things. I don't know how to word this without saying too much or not enough or however, but,
When did we do it? In December?
no, we did
Wait,
that right
what month is
after.
You guys did the superintendent's evaluation, it was in
May or
August.
June.
Yeah, it was I
So
think it's the August.
We have
meetings.
to do it annually, so it always will fall after an election in some way, right?
But this reads specifically that the board members taking oath in office in April. So I'm asking the question because that's not how, I don't know if this changed because I wasn't a board member at the time. So if it wasn't done in April, I understand that it's annually, but then this doesn't match what we are doing. Is that correct, Andrea?
This language has not changed with our recommendation here than what it was prior. I think the practices have changed, but I'll certainly defer to Bob and Nick on that.
So I'm
Mr. President?
Yes, Molly.
It just occurs to me that it is prior to an election and new people being elected. It's prior to this year's election.
and it really should be done before, before any new board members come on.
So it is done
the
before new board
evaluation
members.
is within the thing. I don't think it's really fair for new board members to come on and evaluate somebody who hasn't worked with them.
So you're saying, I think in the cycle, technically it's correct. That's correct.
But that's not the language in here, and that's what I'm asking. Like, I'm fine with the approving all that, I'm not asking to go back on it, but the language is very specific in here on page 8. And so I'm asking, are we following page 8, or are we following like, oh, we moved it to August, and so now it's annually in August, then I guess technically then this language would be at whatever annual renewal is picked.
I think I understand what
Does
you're
that make
saying.
sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's like a new board member wouldn't have enough time under their belt to maybe understand the whole picture of it. Like, it would be helpful to have had at least a year's time. So having it in March maybe would be better because you'd have all that 11 months of time, is what you're saying.
No, the language that's used in here says that it is appropriate to do so prior to newly elected board members taking the oath of office in April. When applicable, board members can provide written summaries, blah, 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 but it also talks about in here that if it hasn't happened annually, that the superintendent acknowledges that, and then you just schedule. I'm not saying that what happened was wrong or incorrect. I'm just asking, like, what's the plan for this? Because it says April in here right now.
It's just talking about taking the oath of office in April. It's not saying it has to be in April. So it doesn't matter.
So it could be in August, could be in September, could be in October, could be November, could be December, anytime before that election with the current board. It's just, do you want it closer to the election? Like,
Well, I mean, I don't really know if this is like the time to have this conversation necessarily, because I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you want people evaluating you that have worked with you, or do you want newly people coming in evaluating?
Oh, I think he's
I
benefited from
think
that.
it's a
You
good
know?
suggestion.
I mean, personally, if I were, I'm just sitting here, and if people were evaluating me, I would like them to have at least worked with me for a short amount of time before they're like, hey,
think
this
that's
is
a
what
good
I've
point.
seen instead of this is what I know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
mean,
think that makes,
I
I think
evaluate
it's a good
people for
point.
work
Especially
frequently
because
in HR, but this is like, that just seems very strange to me. And
if we're doing it in August, that's kind of a dead time. That may be why it's then. That's what I'm kind of thinking maybe. That's just become tradition. But it really is, like, you haven't had a ton of meetings if you're a new board member. So I think that's a good point to say that, maybe January or February would be better. Before, I think you could potentially get into some really busy times. But I
Andrea.
think we should talk about that.
I do think you're in compliance with the board policy, assuming that it occurs within that particular school year, right? So whether it's August or February, it's still within that calendar year or that school year that's applicable. It's just, I think the specificity of it was not to have it occur right after the election with new board members, but not defining what the actual time period that you have to wait after that general election or after the board member election is. So I would say if your practice is to do it in August, September, October, that would be consistent with this language because it's not occurring right after, but I agree it's not really defined. My presumption is the intent of the language was not to have brand-new board members be doing that evaluation when they haven't yet done the work.
I agree with
Yeah.
that, and that's the language that's how I was interpreting it, but my question, I don't think I was being super clear on this. So it reads on the last line here, first line of the last paragraph, the board shall take action on contract and compensation changes when appropriate to do so or prior to newly elected board members taking oath of office in April. And there was some discussion that might happen. So I'm curious if we are scheduling that to happen.
There was conversation that we might do a superintendent evaluation right after an election. I'm sorry, I'm trying to track.
Sure.
I'm not overly comfortable talking about things that could be closed session, not closed session. I'm not very well versed on that, so I'm good with that.
Okay, and yeah, we'll have a
But,
conversation.
I mean,
Yeah.
saying that it's in April just makes kind of a little bit of sense.
Okay. Okay, sounds good, so.
Last item, school closure and transition planning. So really, there's not a whole lot to talk about tonight. The conversation's really gonna be tomorrow night with the boundary piece. The different working groups have been meeting, looking at staffing needs, looking at logistics as it goes with moving buildings and moving furniture and all of those other components and things along those lines. I know the principals have been analyzing the feedback from the staff engagement surveys. And again, you gotta remember not staff engagement, the staff placement surveys. So this is people saying, I want to be in this building, I want to teach at this grade level. It's not feedback on a process or anything along those lines. I know there were some questions about that in the past. Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, we are having our first of 2 boundary meetings. MGT will be leading that meeting completely. They have 4 consultants coming to lead that meeting. They're gonna be spending some time giving some background information, background data. A lot of it is things that the board has seen already, but want to make sure everybody is operating with the same level of information. And then they're going to be going through and presenting 3 different plans or 3 different options related to rebounding process. And they're going to be looking for feedback. There's going to be a poll anywhere that has 12 different questions on it that is talking about what do you like about this option, what do you not like, what would you like to see changed. Of the 3 options, is there any that you absolutely think is the best option? Are there any that you absolutely couldn't live with? Start to look at that stuff. So if all of a sudden all the feedback we get is, hey, the blue option is 90% of the people that responded to that said, please do not move forward with the blue option, then we wouldn't continue to bring the blue option forward, but maybe there would be 2 versions of a green option, type of thing as we work through it. They will take all that feedback. There's also open-ended questions that they'll be collecting all that feedback. There's also going to be survey portal for anybody that cannot attend the meeting tomorrow night. It will be broadcast and recorded, put on our website, and they'll have till Friday to be able to submit feedback through a document portal. We'll have that up on our website and make sure we have that out. And then the consultants will take that information from both tomorrow night and any online feedback they've gotten through Friday. They'll synthesize that, make adjustments to boundaries and things like that. We'll meet with them towards the end of next week. And then be ready for, kind of round 2, saying, okay, here are the adjustments that have been made based on the feedback. There'll be a little bit of review of data. So those folks that can only make one or the other boundary meeting, they're able to get some of that feedback or that data. And then make some adjustments, get feedback again, and then get some final boundaries for the board to, and a recommendation to the board moving forward into February. So tomorrow night, it'll be right here at the middle school, starts at 6 o'clock. We will have childcare available. I believe Tracy has it on our website. You can RSVP if you need that childcare availability. And so we will have that, ready to go.
Mr. President?
Maria?
Tracy, I bet you have this in the hopper, but I just want to after tomorrow night's presentation, can we send a note out to everybody, like this is available so you can fill it out and the deadline and all that fun jazz?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I have one other question related to school closure transition plan that I should know the answer to, but I forgot. When are so we're gonna set the boundaries and then you've done the staffing surveys, and when are the staffing decisions? When is that hoping to be done?
We were just meeting about that today, and at this time, our goal, assuming the board's able to approve the boundaries on February 9th, I think that is, we'll have that communication that last week of February.
That's great. Thank you.
And support staff as well. That'll still continue into March and April.
Okay, that brings this part of the meeting to.
One more question, sorry. On the MGT, we've gotten a couple emails, so I'm just wondering if you can clarify this. Talking about maps and graphics on page 6, 7, and 23 that include data for not just K through 5 students. They're saying that it actually is for all grade levels, including middle and high school students, and that change in the population at the high school and middle school is impacting the data shown on the pages. And they're talking about, since the boundaries would be redrawn for only elementary students, that's a significant, they see that as an issue. So I'm wondering if you can address that.
Which pages would you like me to address it on?
They're talking about page 6, 7, and 23 that include data for not just, it includes data for not just K through 5 students. It's showing all grade levels, including middle and high school students.
Yep. That's in the map is what it's showing, but it is also showing, it does break it down by grade level. And I believe it does break it down by building as well on the left-hand side. So it's not, none of the decisions that we've been making have been looking at our K-12 enrollment in totality. They've all been based on K-5 numbers. When you go to student density, the student density map on slide 7, this is from the December 8th meeting. That shows where our kids are. And the density of our kids, it's a heat map, as it situates. When you get into the, let's see, what was the other one, 20-something? 23. On page 23 or slide 23. Okay, again, slide 23 is just, it's a graphic representation of where we're increasing students, where we're declining students. And it does specifically talk about, in their new presentation, it will specifically talk about the elementaries, middle school and high school, when they think they're going to stabilize, and the different enrollment numbers. I will say that all of the other documents, or all the other numbers, I mean, for example, on slide 22, the one right before it, it breaks down the 5 and 10 year forecast based on K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, and K12. And so when we've been looking at, and it even gives a narrative saying that we'll initially decline, eventually stabilizing by 2030 with elementary kids. So I think, I don't think there's any concern that we don't have data broken out by elementary, middle school, and high school. I do know the email you're talking about that a constituent had, but the conversations we've had about closing buildings or have been very specific to the elementaries and the decline in elementary enrollment, and we've been always comparing our elementary enrollment to our elementary capacities. We haven't been looking at overall district capacity, overall district enrollment. Now, the overall district enrollment does put pressure financially on the district. However, everything around this, the forecasting related to building closures has been related to K-5, and I think they've separated that out throughout the process.
I think that's great. Can I ask if there's any other questions, community questions anyone maybe had that we should be talking about before tomorrow? That anyone else is hearing?
I think that I saw the similar email that you referenced. I wasn't terribly concerned when I went back and looked at these, because you can see the progression through the presentation of what they're doing. And yes, there are slides where sometimes it's just elementary, and sometimes slides where they give you the full picture, but it's in the context of the full presentation. So for me, when I saw that, I was like, the data still holds true. And now we're going to see a presentation where they're focusing on the elementaries. In terms of other questions, I can't speak for the other board members. I have not gotten any.
All right, then moving on, now the board will go to closed session. We will be reconvening to take action on information from the closed session, but I would accept a motion to go into closed session.
Mr. President,
Maria.
I'd like to make a motion that the board will convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of a public employee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Brian. We'll do a roll call vote. Dahl?
Aye.
Garza? Oh, no, no Garza tonight. Gerlach?
Aye.
Powers?
Aye.
Rosowski?
Aye.
Rudy?
Aye.
Bauman? Aye. We are now in closed session. We are back in open session. I would like to, a motion to remove the term interim from our interim chief academic officer, Shannon Sexy, and replace and offer a new contract as chief academic officer. Do I have a motion?
I make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Second from Aaron. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. And now I'll accept a motion to,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. We are adjourned.